As is very evident, what the data suggests As is very evident, what the data suggests is that India does stand out as an island of resilience, as an island of resurgence. We have gone through a process of recovery post-COVID, and the question now is how As is very evident, what the data suggests is that India does stand out as an island of resilience, as an island of resurgence. We have gone through a process of recovery post-COVID, and the question now is how much can we leverage the current geopolitical situation, how much can we leverage this whole China plus one diversification, supply chain diversification that is currently underway, and which will be the sectors that will actually drive growth for us. We're talking about 7%. We've seen a very scorching pace of GDP growth come in for Q2 ahead of all estimates at 7.6%. In fact, the RBI just yesterday saying that perhaps 7% is on the conservative side. So when the Reserve Bank starts talking about being conservative on growth and expects growth to do better, then that tells you that there is clearly something unfolding. It is a status quo policy that the Reserve Bank has delivered. Macroeconomic stability continues, and even the possibility of a recession in the US, etc., now seems like it is less of a chance. So things stacking up very well for India and for corporate India at this point in time. So without further ado, Mr. Krishnan, if I could start by asking you, we're pretty much at the end of this calendar year now, and it's been a fairly substantive year for you and your ministry in terms of the legislative agenda that you've been able to push through, as well as things like the PLI that I just spoke of. If I were to ask you to sum up for me the 2 or 3 highlights that you believe have been the key milestones that you've been able to achieve, that you've been able to clock, and the priorities for the road ahead.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to all of you. I think 2023, the calendar year, has been quite a remarkable year for the electronics and the IT sector in the country. If you look at the key achievements of the year in the electronics sector, it's really been the Indian semiconductor mission really taking off, with the first major investment of Micron being grounded, and more investments are in the pipeline as we speak, and we can expect something substantial to come out of that. And likewise, the PLI scheme for hardware, both on the mobile phone side, which is doing very well currently, probably the most successful PLI scheme amongst all the schemes that the Government of India has launched. And the PLI scheme for electronic hardware has also had a successful launch, with 27 companies stacking up in that list, and more of them taking off with the production. The other side, I think another significant milestone for the ministry was the passage of the DPDP Act. In terms of regulation, I think it's a key piece of regulation which balances the need for privacy, the need for personal data being secure, against the need for innovation. So, it's one of those acts where usually there is one set of people who are elated with something like this and another set who are unhappy. But I think we've managed something which nobody is absolutely elated with, but nobody is so totally disappointed. So it's sort of hit that sweet spot where everyone seems to find it broadly acceptable. And I think the rules will come out hopefully in the coming weeks, and that should top off a good year on the regulation side as well for the ministry.
Let me bring the Pharma Secretary into the conversation as well. Mr. Chawla, many thanks for joining us. As I pointed out, the first PLI scheme to be rolled out by the government was for the pharma sector. If you can give me an overview of where things currently stand, both in terms of API as well as in terms of MedTech, because on both, while there has been progress, has it met your expectation?
Thank you, Shereen. Uh, as you know, India has already earned the sobriquet, the pharmacy of the world. And that is kudos to all the doyens of this industry who have really set up a large and now an export-oriented industry in India. Just to give a little glimpse, the Indian pharma industry today is 50 to 60 billion. It's the third largest in the world, and half of it is export-oriented. So last year, the Indian pharma industry exported nearly 25 billion worth of end products all over the world, including the bulk drugs. So to give you a little overview of how far we have reached in the PLI schemes, pharma is a success story of the PLI scheme. And we have three schemes. One is for the formulations, one is for the bulk drugs, and one is for MedTech or the medical devices. The formulation scheme is doing so well that all targets are being exceeded 100%. And that is in line with the fast and rapid growth of this industry. The bulk drugs was the most difficult one. And in bulk drugs, we realized the problem during COVID and how sensitive our global supply chains were. With that experience, we shortlisted about 51 bulk drugs, which could be targeted and which we should target as producing in India. And then that was later refined to around 40 because the remaining could be produced from those 40. And with 3 to 4 rounds of the PLI scheme, and we are happy to announce that in 33 of these bulk drugs, the production has already started in India. And last year, our imports in bulk drugs became equal to our exports in bulk drugs. This has happened for the first time in our industrial history. And that, I think, is a very big milestone. On the MedTech sector, this was an industry where we were nearly 90% import dependent. But today, 136 products have been taken up for manufacturing under the PLI for medical devices. And that includes not just Indian industry, Indian firms. It includes global firms, the big names that you talk of, Siemens, GE, who are now beginning to produce high-tech equipment, imaging, cancer therapy, and the like within our country.
Let me come to you, Mr. Bhalla, and let's talk about what's happening on the renewable energy side. We've just, we're actually in the process of finishing off with the COP this year, with the Prime Minister already making a pitch for India to host the COP in 2033. But on the renewable side, what are you most excited about? What's the milestone that you believe you've been able to clock that gives you the most confidence about the future?
Thank you so much. See, in renewable energy, we feel that we have, of course, started. We started galloping in the last few years. I mean, we were just crawling in the beginning, 10 years ago, and now we have started to gallop. But of course, the journey has just started. We have a long way to go. We have already achieved about 180 to 179 gigawatts of RE in India as of October. And our target is to go to 500, as you know, non-fossils by 2030. Nuclear is going to be very small. It's going to increase only very little. So renewable energy capacity is going to be around 485 out of 500. So from 179 to 485 in the next 7 years is an ambitious target. We're very hopeful that, and very confident that we should be able to do it. And there are several reasons for that. I mean, it's not only very simple to say that we are confident, but the reasons are, very clear. One, we have we have standardized the processes and the system. The industry is confident and very comfortable with what is there. The banking system, the financial system is very confident about it, and they have trust in this. The private sector is leading the pack. We don't, as public sector, only some public sector units do it, but that too as a profit orientation. rather than from public orientation. So it's a very, very simple, transparent process in which we award bids and people go out and execute projects. And I think there's a huge capacity to add to, which the private sector is very willing to contribute to.
Let me bring Ms. Praveen into the conversation as well, ma'am. Let's talk about what's happening in the ministry that you're looking after with the food parks that were being envisioned by the government, foreign direct investment into the food processing sector that has been on the agenda as far as the government is concerned. It's also been a challenging year for the food business, not just from a private sector perspective, but from a government's perspective with volatile prices and, of course, food security being a key challenge. How would you sum up FY24?
As for the food parks that you questioned, of course, we did start with the food parks, but let me clarify to you that we do have our 40 food parks, which are, of which 20 plus are operational. The rest are still on a process of completion. The understanding that came was that rather than going for a food park which kind of brings processing to a particular place far away from the place where the production of raw material happens, probably it's better to spread out thin rather than focusing at certain places. And that is why the ministry has changed its orientation to give a push to the unit scheme, which is smaller units being built up everywhere. My favorite line here is that we should carpet bomb the country with, smaller units, because that's what probably will generate the largest amount of, not just employment, possibility of processing, and no tomatoes will probably be thrown on the streets thereafter. Because if you bring either irradiation facilities or better storage facilities or processing facilities closer to your raw material, that is a success story. And that's probably why the countries where we see very good progress that has happened in the food processing sector, this is the model that they have adopted. We do have this requirement at this point, and I look forward to this kind of a policy shift happening very soon. In fact, it's already happened. We initially had some infrastructure creation schemes that were going on, but in the last 3-4 years, the ministry has shifted from just creation of small minor infrastructure projects sporadically. We go to formalization of the unorganized sector under the PMFME scheme, and we have taken the PLI in a big way. Under the PLI, I must say we are also a success story, like my colleagues have just informed. We are completing our investment targets by March 24. We will be completing whatever was committed at the time of sanction of the scheme. We started our incentive claim settled for the year 22-23, which was in itself a great thing because initial hiccups were there for some sectors. Ours, because we have smaller units, so it was easier to bring them up rather than the large ones that my colleagues are working on. And it was much easier to do, and as I have already informed, the employment targets are very well in the sight to complete. 2.5 lakh was the target. We have gone over 2 lakhs already. So this has been a success story. The 50 companies, in fact, we don't deserve the credit. The credit goes to the companies, the industry, which has really done a good job here.
There's a common thread, or a few common threads that are running through the conversations that have already transpired on this panel. One, PLI, and that seems to be ministry after ministry, sector after sector, a scheme that is working. And I wanted to understand from you, Mr. Krishnan, I'll start by asking you and get all of your points of view. This is a time-bound scheme. Do you believe that there is a need for us to consider the possibility of an extension as far as the PLI is concerned, or do you believe that what is currently in place should be enough? Mr. Krishnan, I'll start with you, and Mr. Chadha, then I'll come to you.
On the PLI scheme, clearly I think it's helped significantly to bring in a lot of new manufacturing prowess into the sector. There's, of course, I think compared to the we've also learned lessons along the way compared to the first one, which was mobiles, where the domestic value addition was not emphasized so much. As we have gone along, that yardstick has been increased, and we are required to increase the domestic value addition, which makes it more difficult for companies to meet it easily. And in the process, the domestic value addition element is also increasing. So to that extent, one of the things which also accounts for the mobile PLI success is the hurdles that they had to pass were significantly lower than subsequent schemes. And I think that is a good thing, because ultimately it is about localizing more of the production in India and localizing more of the supply chain in India. And that's been a true success. Companies are also learning this, and companies are also doing their best to get there. In some of the sectors now, it's almost gone up to 50%. They do find it a challenge, but they are still willing to do it. The good thing, as was already pointed out, is that it's not just domestic Indian companies, but there are multinational companies and a whole host of others who think it's worthwhile getting into it. So to that extent, I think the design of the scheme and the challenges that it poses is keeping people honest and keeping people on the straight track in terms of achieving its ultimate objectives. It may be tough, and sometimes we feel, oh, it has not succeeded, the investment hasn't come in, or the production hasn't started, or the disbursement hasn't taken place. But all of these conditions have to be met, and the conditions are intended for a specific purpose, and they are biting and they are achieving the intended objectives.
Mr. Chadha?
Our experience with the PLI scheme has been that all successful applicants have a forward-looking financial model. They have built in the entire investment cycle into whatever decision they have taken under the scheme. And they're setting up greenfield plants. So when you take investment of that magnitude and greenfield, and the way scheme is structured, it is incremental, gradually incremental. So you keep going up and up and up and up at a gradient. And by the time the scheme ends in, say, 5 to 7 years, you would already have reached a takeoff stage. So we don't think you will need to extend the time window. By that time, all these plants and their products will be well established.
Let me also bring Mr. Sinha into the conversation. How are you reading what the EU has now decided to do, which is the carbon border adjustment mechanism on the import of goods, including things like steel, aluminum, fertilizers, chemicals, and the implications and the impact of that for Indian industry?
So India has a position, and I think that position has been articulated well enough by Commerce Minister and senior officers of the Commerce Ministry and others. But I think the important thing is that if we talk to the Indian industry, many of them are willing to comply, because until unless we are able to convince you that
you have no choice but to comply.
And so industry is getting ready, and we think we will be in a position. I think one critical development that we should take notice of is the carbon credit trading scheme, which is now being introduced by Ministry of Power through Bureau of Energy Efficiency. And they aim to measure carbon embedded into different products, so that getting that into picture enables us to be able to participate and comply with the EU's requirement. We fear that if it is a contagion which spreads to many other countries, say for example UK or US or many other parts, then it will become a problem. And so we are keeping a watch. We think Ministry of Commerce is doing a good job, and hopefully we should be in a position to convince others that this kind of segmentation of the market on the basis of the carbon embedded is not a good thing to do.
Well, that kind of contagion, I would imagine, is not something that you would certainly be hoping for. But on green steel, since we are on this issue and we're talking about, future regulation, etc., where do you believe India currently stands, and what is the roadmap that you see over the next few years as far as green steel specifically is concerned?
I mean, generally when we say green steel doesn't mean that we have no carbon embedded into it. There would be carbon, but we can reduce the amount of carbon that gets emitted into in course of production. So in the short term, we are looking at technologies which are available currently. For example, bringing energy efficiency using renewable energy, or preparing materials in a manner in which the use of energy is less. But in the medium term, we'll have technologies like use of hydrogen, which is being promoted by National Green Hydrogen Mission. Technology is there, but needs to mature in order to be mainstreamed. Also, CCUS technologies also need to mature, and their cost needs to come down in order for us to mainstream them. We are also looking at the possible rise in the cost that might happen on account of introduction of CCUS-like technology. And some assessments say that if we want to address half of the carbon embedded into product, CCUS is the way to go, and that might lead to a rise of about 20% of the cost. So that kind of assessment has been done, but hopefully we think that over a period of time, technologies mature and we are in a position to get them cheaper. And the third phase is the longer phase in which you get access to disruptive technologies. For example, people say that it could be the iron could be extracted by using techniques like molten electrolysis. There are people probably in Israel who think sodium could be a medium of getting iron from the iron ore. So these are technologies on the horizon, but when they will come into mainstream, nobody knows. But so
we'll have to keep a watch on emerging technologies. But since we are talking about global compliance and global standards, Mr. Tavla, let me address this issue with you and go back to your original statement of India being positioned as the pharmacy of the world. And what we are seeing at this point in time is the government taking action, the government actually intervening to ensure that we deliver on the quality standards. And I understand that there's a nationwide sort of drive that is currently underway, given some of the instances that we've seen take place in 22 and more recently in 2023. How much of a risk is this to the aspiration of wanting to sort of move up the value chain and go from that 24 billion export target to higher?
Thanks. I'll be brief given the time constraint. Yes, you're right. This is a negative externality. If someone produces a low-quality drug, it farms the brand name of the whole industry. So we are working with the drug regulator, which is the CDSO, to quickly develop and upgrade our standards for both pharmaceuticals, traditional pharmaceuticals, the biologicals, biosimilars that are coming up, and the new medtech industry. At the same time, we need to augment capacity within the system, particularly the traditional pharma and the new age pharma and the medtech. That is being done. And at the same time, we have set up a window, a scheme to assist all those industries, all those medium to smaller players who genuinely want to upgrade their quality standards. We have a scheme of hand-holding them. It is called PTURs. And we will be working with them along with CDSO to ensure that we have all the incentives right to upgrade and have globally compliant quality standards.
You know, if I may, I would appreciate if any of the other secretaries want to comment on this as well. Since we are talking about compliance, we're talking about building capacity within various ministries, within various regulators, etc. How much of this is also a challenge on account of center and state? Even as far as pharma is concerned, for instance, you have a central drug regulator and then you have compliance at the state level. How much of that is a challenge, and what do you believe as we move forward, can be done to actually bridge the gaps across different sectors when we deal with these center-state issues?
Persuasion, nudge, and direction. So we have had a session with the drug regulators in the states.